What is happening in Syria right now? What is the strategy of the rebels controlling the country? What complex dynamics are unfolding in Syria after the fall of Assad? What competing interests do Israel, Turkey, Russia, and the US have in Syria? What challenges will the new rulers face in the future? We'll discuss all this in this video. So let us begin. The Bashar al Assad regime in Syria has come to an end. Assad had been in power since the year 2000. Before him, the reins of Syria were held by his father, Hafez al Assad, who seized power in 1971 through a military coup. This means the Assad family ruled Syria for more than 50 years. Finally, in 2024, with the fall of Bashar al Assad, the Assad regime has officially ended. Currently, Syrian rebels control Damascus, the capital of Syria. You may have heard in the news that the HTS group is now the dominant force in Syria, controlling Damascus. HTS stands for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a Sunni Islamist militant organization. It is currently one of the most powerful rebel groups in Syria and has become the new de facto ruler of the country. It is important to note that de facto simply means the on-ground reality, irrespective of whether it is legally established. The HTS group did not come to power through legal or constitutional means. It seized control by overthrowing the Assad regime. While it is not a formally established government, it serves as the de facto governing authority in Syria at the moment. Anyway, the HTS group aims to establish Islamic rule in Syria and create an Islamic state governed by Sharia law. Countries like the US, UK, Russia, and Turkey consider HTS a terrorist organization. However, given that the HTS group has played a role in overthrowing the anti West and pro Russia Assad regime, the West is happy with the group. This is why there is now consideration of removing the terrorist designation from the group. The US has already removed the $10 million bounty on HTS leader Ahmad al-Shara. Previously, there was a $10 million reward for his capture. However, a recent meeting between a US delegation and the HTS group led the US to view Shara as potentially useful, prompting the removal of the bounty. Both the US and the UK are in direct contact with HTS because the group is currently playing a central role in the dynamics of the Syrian conflict. A US delegation recently visited Damascus and held discussions with rebel groups, civil society organizations, and various communities regarding the country's future strategy. Seeing the readiness of the US to engage with the HTS group, HTS is trying to position itself as a modern rebel group. It does not want to be seen as an extremist group like ISIS. It believes that if it wants the support of Western countries, power, and funds, its vision of Syria's future should align with that of the US. After all, the Western sanctions, which have devastated Syria's economy, need to be lifted. Therefore, HTS is realizing that to rule, it must govern in a structured manner because extremist ideology will not gain acceptance. In addition to maintaining its militant grip on the region, it will also need to provide administration and services to the people. Only then can its rule gain international acceptance. Through this approach, HTS aims to consolidate power, gain legitimacy, and establish its control in Syria. HTS is advancing with this strategy. To ensure it is not perceived merely as an armed group, HTS is creating administrative bodies, forming ministries, and attempting to function like a government. Its aim is to secure the support of both the local population and the international community. People are unlikely to support insurgents, but if you present yourself as administrators and establish a government, you are more likely to gain their support. Therefore, HTS is positioning itself as a governing authority and attempting to distance itself from its image as an extremist group. If you wish to maintain control, then you need to provide public services such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure while appearing more moderate. By collecting taxes and fees and delivering services, HTS seeks to mimic a functioning government. It is also creating a formal government structure to regulate affairs. To generate steady income streams, the group is imposing taxes on local businesses and tariffs on border crossings. So HTS is effectively experimenting with governance and even engaging in negotiations with external actors, much like a government would. HTS already has templates, like the example of Afghanistan, where the Taliban has also tried to implement a similar governance mechanism. If you remember, even ISIS declared a caliphate in 2014 and attempted to establish a government like structure in the territories it controlled. Then you already know about Hamas, which runs a de facto government in Gaza. It manages schools, hospitals, and policing. Alongside all this, it also operates as a militant group. You know, it was Hamas that attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, starting the Gaza war. So the HTS group already has all these examples. Even in Syria's neighbor Lebanon, there is Hezbollah, which participates in the country's political system. It provides services such as healthcare and education. This militant group has established a comprehensive network of social services in Lebanon and positioned itself as a public service provider. So, if you notice, we are observing a trend where militant groups are establishing their hold in civil society. They are not limiting themselves to military activities alone. Beyond that, they are playing a dual role. To increase their influence, they engage in social welfare work alongside military activities. The HTS group is also trying to blend governance with militancy in a similar way in Syria to change people's perceptions. This strategy aims to effectively manage the territory while sustaining its operations. If the public holds a negative perception, dissatisfaction will increase and its rule will lack acceptance. Keeping all this in mind, after Assad's departure in Syria, the HTS group is adopting a clever strategy. It is uniting the different factions in the country under one umbrella. Of course, the guidance for this strategy comes from foreign powers that are actively monitoring the entire situation. All the different factions in Syria that opposed Assad and contributed to overthrowing his government will now be unified under a centralized military structure. The various rebel groups, previously scattered, will be brought together to consolidate power, with efforts made to bring stability to the country. During this transition, Western powers will support the HTS group. HTS leader Mohammad al-Jolani has dissolved the various rebel groups that helped overthrow Assad. The fighters from these groups will now be integrated into a new national army operating under the Ministry of Defense. So an attempt is being made to build a cohesive military force in Syria. This is because once such a force is established, centralized power will emerge and a unified governance structure can be presented. Only then will there be international acceptance and funds will flow in for Syria's reconstruction. Otherwise, the various rebel groups will remain scattered and continue fighting among themselves for power, leading to persistent instability in the country. This instability would provide Russia and Iran with opportunities to undo the progress that Western powers have achieved in Syria. Obviously, Western countries do not want this outcome. They want internal stability in Syria, where rebel groups are not engaged in internal conflicts. There should be no further power struggles in the country so that a stable environment can be created for Syria's reconstruction. Now, this may sound bad, but the reality is that war is incredibly profitable for some powerful companies. During wars, major defense companies secure massive contracts for weapons and military equipment. Whenever a conflict arises, the revenues of major defense players sees a huge jump. As per the SIPRI report, major arms companies made significant profits due to the Ukraine and Gaza wars. Remember, defense contractors and their related companies earn huge profits during wartime. Their weapons are sold, and the performance of weapons is tested in conflict zones under real combat conditions. Naturally, better performing weapons attract more buyers. Using the data obtained, the effectiveness and reliability of weapons and military technologies are assessed, and necessary improvements are made. This provides a competitive edge in the global arms market. That's how defense companies reap substantial gains during wartime. Then, after the war, tremendous business opportunities arise for construction, engineering, and finance companies in reconstruction efforts. The interests of many companies are tied to wars, which is why we see so many conflicts. Wars are manufactured. So, when world leaders say war torn nations must be rebuilt as quickly as possible, it is not because they are concerned about the people. Nope. It is because reconstruction stimulates the economy. Sad, but true. Anyway, just like Gaza and Ukraine, the same is happening in Syria too. HTS wants to bring stability to Syria so that reconstruction efforts can begin and the Syrian economy can be revived. On ground actions in Syria are pointing in this direction. For instance, Syria's caretaker administration has committed to ensuring humanitarian access at all borders. HTS is using the same language typically employed by governments, emphasizing that minorities will be protected, essential services will be provided, and humanitarian aid will not be blocked. Naturally, these statements have been welcomed by the United Nations. This is how the HTS group is attempting to boost its international profile. The HTS group has years of experience managing the administrative system in Idlib, which will come in handy now. HTS has already learned how to respond. The lessons gained from administering smaller areas will now need to be applied on a national level. Currently, Syria is witnessing a tremendous power play and significant foreign interference. Various powers have competing interests. Turkey, for instance, aims to gain territory in the north and might invade Kurdish controlled territories in northwest Syria. The NATO member Turkey is also eyeing potential economic gains from Syria's reconstruction efforts. Israel is already expanding its territories in Syria. The Golan Heights and its adjacent areas are under Israel's control. Israel is not going to let go of such a tremendous opportunity, especially now that Trump has returned to power. With this, Israel is likely to have a free hand to act. It will rapidly expand settlements in the Golan Heights and maintain its military presence in the buffer zone, citing security reasons. The Golan Heights is strategically important for Israel. As a plateau and elevated area, it provides Israel with a commanding view of the surrounding regions. Being positioned on high ground offers a significant defensive advantage, enabling Israel to detect incoming threats in advance. Additionally, the area has crucial water resources, which are vital for Israel's water security. Controlling this region is essential for both its strategic depth and resource security, which is why Israel is actively working to consolidate its hold on the area. Coming to the west, Hezbollah in Lebanon is facing strategic challenges after the fall of the Assad regime. Israel has already broken Hezbollah's back. On top of that, with the departure of pro-Iran Bashar al-Assad, the supply line from Iran to Hezbollah has been cut off. Hezbollah will now have to find an alternative route to receive weapons from Iran. Moreover, during the Assad regime, Hezbollah used to make money through drug trafficking with the help of its network. But with the end of the Assad regime, this profitable trade has also collapsed, dealing a deep blow to Hezbollah's financial resources. In Syria, due to the western tilt of HTS, it will be very challenging for Hezbollah to achieve its regional objectives. The Iran-led axis of resistance has been weakened. Hezbollah and Hamas have been badly thrashed, and Assad has been overthrown. All of this has reduced Iran's influence, making it more difficult for Iran to achieve its strategic goals. Next, talking about Russia, it wants to secure its military bases in Syria. Russia has military bases in Latakia and Tartus on the Mediterranean coast. With the help of the Tartus naval base, Russia can project its naval power in the Mediterranean Sea. From the Latakia air base, it can conduct air operations in the region. For Russia, both of these military bases are crucial for intelligence gathering and surveillance. These bases increase Russia's geopolitical influence in the Middle East. The fall of the pro-Russian Assad regime is a major setback for Russia. With the departure of its ally Bashar al-Assad, Russia's strategic military assets are no longer secure. According to reports, Russia is relocating its advanced weapons from Syria and deploying them in Libya. Of course, just like elsewhere, the US wants to counter Russia in Syria as well. Already the narrative has been spread that Syria is liberated, the dictator is gone, and now Syria's recovery will begin, etc. However, it remains to be seen how all these things will materialize on the ground. It is uncertain how inclusive the process of rebuilding Syria will be. Will the Syrians be included in the decision-making process? Will a representative government come into power here as soon as possible? Or will an interim leader consolidate power like in Bangladesh? Will the future of Syria be determined by its people? Or will the future of this country also be dictated by a foreign hand? Syria should be run by its people, not by the interests of a few selected countries or the profits of a few selected companies. An inclusive government should be formed as soon as possible. Rule should not be imposed on the people. There should not be a regime like that of the Taliban. When they came to power, the Taliban made many promises, but now women's rights are being violated and they are going back on their promises. Keeping this experience in mind, the international community should think carefully before supporting any extremist group. The roots and ideologies of HTS are not different from those of the Taliban. Both are groups with a Salafi jihadist mindset. They strictly follow Islamic texts and implement them with a militant approach. They will not shy away from using extreme violence to achieve their goal of establishing an Islamic state. So even if they present themselves as administrators to the world, they remain extremists at the core. They are just waiting for the opportunity. They only understand the language of strength. Now, while Israel is bombarding Syria and occupying territories, HTS is talking about a diplomatic solution. There has been no mention of a military response. Because A, Israel is strong, and B, HTS doesn't want tensions with the West. Here, HTS has completely ignored its promise to protect Syria's sovereignty. So now, when it lacks the power and resources, HTS says whatever the West wants to hear: human rights, stability, etc. HTS knows that it cannot be seen as involved in social repression, extrajudicial killings, or displaying radical ideology. It cannot let any of this come to light. For now, it is more beneficial for it to be seen as an administrator. Later, when it gains power, it would want to impose strict Sharia. After all, it is an affiliate group of Al Qaeda. Earlier, HTS was known as Jabhat al Nusra, the Syrian arm of Al Qaeda. In 2017, it changed its name from Jabhat al Nusra to Hayat Tahrir al Sham. It underwent rebranding. But the ideology doesn't change with rebranding. That is why countries like the US and the UK continue to designate it as a terrorist organization. However, the approach of Western countries is now changing because only interests are permanent in geopolitics. At this time, since HTS can play a vital role in promoting Western interests in Syria, the US is engaging with it. It is asking the HTS group to put a check on its behavior and ideology. That is why HTS is refraining from openly displaying its extremist mindset. It knows that now it will have to follow the models and norms accepted by the international community. It is realizing that necessary changes will have to be made to its Islamist ideology. Instead of strict Sharia, a moderated version will have to be presented, which will not be easy. Because even a slight deviation from strict Sharia will be seen as a dilution of Islam by other extremist groups. Due to this fear only, the Taliban had to once again implement women's rights restrictions. The Islamic State Khorasan province started labeling some actions as anti-Islamic, expressing dissatisfaction with the lack of strict implementation of Sharia. So if there is even a slight deviation, extremist Islamist groups will definitely oppose it. The conflict will begin again. This is why HTS cannot abandon the extremist mindset, because groups like ISIS are ready to seize power. However, acceptance from the international community is also required, which is why the extremist mindset cannot be openly displayed. Therefore, it will not be easy for HTS to deal with this dilemma. In Syria, decades of authoritarian rule have devastated state institutions. There are many factions in the country competing to fill the power vacuum. HTS will have to address these internal divisions. Reconciliation will need to occur between the various rebel groups, bringing them in line with Uncle Sam's agenda. The civil war, which has been ongoing for years, has created many internal divisions in the country. Addressing these divisions is essential for stable governance. Different communities such as Sunni, Alawite, Kurdish, Christian, etc. will need to be united, and people's grievances will have to be addressed. The regime has been toppled with external support, but now the country will also need to be governed. The fighters of the rebel groups have done their job, but now they must be integrated into society. The cities that have been destroyed by the war and the infrastructure, schools, hospitals, industries, will all need to be rebuilt. This will require a massive effort. Additionally, the refugee crisis needs to be addressed. Refugees need to be resettled, and those who have been internally displaced must be reintegrated. The Syrian economy is crippled. Poverty and unemployment are extremely high, and economic recovery is another major challenge. The majority of Syrians live below the poverty line and rely on humanitarian aid. Restoring basic services such as education and healthcare and addressing the humanitarian crisis will require extensive resources. The foreign aid received for reconstruction will not come for free. Conditions will be imposed, and many reforms will be required. Capturing power is one thing, but governing is an entirely different matter. It must be ensured that there is no instability or unrest in the country. Then, if foreign troops refuse to withdraw, what will happen to the claims of sovereignty? How will you manage them? How will you handle the threat from Israel? Proxy conflicts will continue due to the competing interests of multiple foreign powers. How will you deal with them? What will you do when their rivalries destabilize Syria? Even if the various rebel groups who were opposing Assad and fighting the war against him somehow come together, this alliance will remain fragile. The conditionalities required for foreign aid could create differences, causing the alliance to fall apart. It is difficult to bring everyone under a central umbrella, and even more difficult to keep them united under that umbrella. So it would be premature to say that everything is fine in Syria. The chapter of Bashar al-Assad has definitely closed, but the road ahead is full of challenges. The new rulers will face many political, social, and economic obstacles in the future. I hope you have gained some insight into what is happening in Syria. That is all for this session. Thank you for your time.